Hello, parents and guardians, and welcome back to another Discipleship Debrief. So this past Sunday, our youth group was in Mark chapter 12. We did the first 17 verses of the chapter, going from 1 to 17, and it really breaks down into two chunks, right? So there's two headings of this. It is first Jesus' parable of the tenants in the first kind of 12 verses, and then those final few verses are a question Jesus receives about paying taxes to Caesar, kind of the legality of that, practicality of that. And we used both of these stories because both really talk about the sovereignty of God, God's control, God's will. And so we used this story to kind of answer two practical questions about the sovereignty of God. The first, in the parable of tenants, being, does God know that people will reject him? And what does he do about that? What part does he play in that? And so we broke this down because the parable of the tenants really is Jesus in parabolic fashion describing the rejection of God by the people of Israel, and specifically Israel's leaders, right? In verse 12, we see that the leaders understand that Jesus was speaking about them, right? So this parable applies very specifically to the leadership of Israel. And so we see that the parable of the tenants really is talking about human rejection and how it affects the plan of God, right? And what is very encouraging about this is that human rejection does not hinder the plan of God, does not frustrate the plan of God, does not discourage or redirect or anything like that. God's plan goes forth unhindered by human rejection. And we see this because after the tenants finish rejecting the man who placed the vineyard, it goes forth and the vineyard is just given to someone else. Right, this obviously being this illustration for the rejection of Israel, ultimately the crucifying of Christ, and then the gospel going forth into the ends of the earth, right? It wasn't stopped just because they rejected Christ. And so we learn from this that God's sovereignty means that even human rejection cannot stop his plan, cannot hinder his plan in any way. And the practicality of this for us is that it is very encouraging as we live in a world where we can look around and see God rejected all over the place, right? Your student might see friends reject God. They might see someone in their family reject God. They might just be on social media and see people rejecting God left and right, right? And so it can be really easy for us to feel like God's plan is somehow being hindered or being stopped or something like that by all this human rejection, all these people just rejecting him, not wanting anything to do with him. And the encouragement is, it's not. It is not hindered. It's not stopped. Nothing like that, right? The wildest way to understand this is that Jesus and the plan of redemption were not defeated or hindered or anything by the rejection of the Jews. The plan of redemption was accomplished by the rejection of the Jews. God had willed that Christ would go to the cross and he would be put there by his own people. And so the rejection of the Jews in the plan of God was what he used to accomplish the plan of redemption, the salvation of his people. It's incredible. And if on that broad scale, God can use human rejection, how much more on the day-to-day scale can God use rejection to bring himself the ultimate glory and to bring people to himself? So we can be encouraged by that. Your students can be encouraged by that as they look around and see rejection very prominent. And then the next thing we talked about was this idea of paying taxes to Caesar. And really the question we answered through this is God sovereign over all leadership? With the little asterisk being including unbelievers, right? Is God sovereign over the unbelieving government, the unbelieving emperor in this case, right? And so the chief priests and the Herodians, they bring Christ this question. They say, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? And they don't care about his answer. They just want to see him place himself on the wrong side of one of these two crowds, right? If he says, yes, it is lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, then he'll lose the respect of the people, because in the eyes of the Jewish people, you only paid taxes to the temple. If he says, no, it is not lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, then he's an anarchist against Rome, and the Roman government needs to get rid of him, right? So they just want to see him get himself killed. with his answer. And instead, he takes a coin, a denarius. It was a day's wage at the time. He takes the coin. It has a picture of the emperor on it. And he says, "Render to Caesar what are Caesar's, render to God what are God's." And basically, what he's showing the people through this is that God is not against human government, but God actually works human government. God actually sovereignly places people over top of his people. And we see this throughout Jewish history, right? God is just as sovereign when David is ruling as he is when Saul is ruling. Saul was not a godly king. When the the Babylonians are ruling, Babylon was this pagan nation, right? God sovereignly placed Persia over top of Israel. Persia was a pagan nation. God sovereignly placed Rome over top of Israel. Rome was a pagan nation. God sovereignly placed Rome over the early church. Again, pagan nation. And you can track this throughout history. And God's sovereignty is unhindered by whoever is in government, whoever is leading. And in fact, whoever is leading has been placed there by God. We might not know the exact reason why, but ultimately it's to bring himself the most glory, right? And so I encourage the students. I said, this means that we as believers get to have a certain level of respect for government authorities, saying that our God has placed them there. And even if they themselves are an unbeliever and they themselves seem to practice ungodly things, our God has put them there sovereignly for a reason that will ultimately bring himself glory. And we can trust that no matter who it is that's in office, no matter who it is that's elected, right? And it says this in Romans 13. It says that all human leadership, all human government is placed by God. There is no authority on earth that is not given by God. So this is an encouragement for us, right? As believers, we get to hold fast to this reality that we respect government because we are respecting God. And we respect God in his sovereignty, and in his sovereignty, he has placed government over top of us, right? And so, to kind of follow up on this week, I would ask your student the question, honing in more on the second half than on the first half, but I would ask your student the question, do you respect the authority in your life? That's kind of the hard stop, but do you respect the authority in your life in light of the fact they've been placed there by God, right? Are you living out the call that a lot of believers have to respect the authority that is around them, that is above them, with the way we talk about them, the way we act towards them, in light of the fact they've been placed there by God, right? And for you as parents, this can be a time to have a genuine conversation about the difficulty of this. It's not an easy call upon our lives, right? But it is something that we can be encouraged to do, and it's something that helps our witness tremendously, right? When we are the even-keeled people in a crowd of raving people, right? When we are the ones who can say, no, I trust God no matter who wins this, no matter who's elected. It is God's will. So that is what I have for you all this week. If you have any questions or comments or anything, let me know. I'm always available. Otherwise, see you next time.